On paper, it shouldn't exist, but it is perhaps one of the stranger political alliances that have emerged in the past few years. And from an ex-Muslim, let me tell you, it may be new, but it is also extremely dangerous. Not because they agree on the future, they don't. In fact, their visions for society couldn't be more opposed. But they do agree on one thing: the West, as it stands, has to go. That's the glue that holds them together. Of course, I'm talking about the Red-Green Alliance. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of this term before, let's define it first. The Red-Green Alliance isn't some tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. It's a tactical overlap, a marriage of convenience between two very different forces. On the red side, you've got far-left radicals who dream of tearing down the West and rebuilding it as some sort of borderless, decolonized utopia. On the green side, you've got Islamist movements that want to see the West replaced with religious law and rigid order built around Islam. To really understand how this works, we need to get inside the heads of each side. With the left, these activists see themselves as moral revolutionaries. They believe society as it stands is fundamentally corrupt, built on colonialism, racism, patriarchy, capitalism, and every other form of structural oppression. To them, power is always oppressive and never legitimate. Virtue comes from tearing down those systems: borders, hierarchies, traditional family roles, religion, the free market, all seen as tools of domination. Their utopia, on the other hand, is secular, borderless, and endlessly fluid. No dominant religion, no fixed identities, not even gender, no wealthy elites, no settlers. Just a leveled society where no group can stand above another. That's why they romanticize destruction and relativism. Even Western liberal democracy is suspect because it still preserves some of the old structures. And so, in the mind of the far left, teaming up with anyone who wants to weaken the West, even Islamists, feels like progress. You'll even see this strange romanticization. Queers for Palestine, banners at rallies, or academics like Judith Butler bizarrely describing Hamas and Hezbollah as part of the global left. In their eyes, Islamist resistance to the West can be harnessed as just another engine of a revolution. Now, contrast that with Islamists. Their worldview is the polar opposite. Where the left loves fluidity, Islamists crave certainty and order. The word Islam itself means submission, and for them, submission to divine law is the only path to justice. Their endgame isn't coexistence or compromise, it's dominance of their religious code. The Islamist psyche envisions strong vertical authority and tight communal boundaries. Nation-states are irrelevant next to the global Muslim community or even a caliphate. Liberal pluralism? To them, that's weakness. They divide the world into the realm of Islam and the realm of disbelief, and believe it's their duty to expand their system by preaching when possible, by jihad when necessary. The ideal isn't some flexible future, it's a return to the purity of 7th century Medina. That means patriarchal control, rigid gender roles, modesty codes, punishment for blasphemy, and zero tolerance for apostasy or gay rights. Their psyche is anchored in certainty, in rules that cannot be questioned. But if they're so different, why are they chanting side by side? Simple, they share enemies. Both despise Western power, America, Israel, capitalism, and the police or military that defend those systems. Both frame themselves as the oppressed, rising against an oppressor. That's why you'll hear the crossover in chants. Free Palestine resonates with both. No justice, no peace, lifted from left-wing racial justice movements, is shouted right next to Intifada or Death to America, slogans rooted in Islamist struggle. And the visuals match too. The kneeling protesters, keffiyeh-clad youth alongside red flag socialists. It's a strange aesthetic convergence. You can even see this in Australia, for example, where the Green or Islamist side have ironically co-opted Aboriginal movements. Why ironic? Because the indigenous people of Australia rightly went through a very dark stage due to settler colonialism, and Muslims were and are some of history's biggest colonizers. But that doesn't change how they want to be perceived. Both thrive on the same kind of street theatre, and both see themselves as outsiders fighting a corrupt establishment. That emotional bond papers over the contradictions. They're not united by what they want to build, but by what they want to destroy. And often, to destroy, you start by controlling what people can see and hear. Left-wing activists are running propaganda campaigns to whitewash Islam and to push what is effectively taqiyya, the Islamic strategy of deception across social media. As an ex-Muslim, making videos like this, I know how risky it is to push back against that narrative. That's exactly why I use Proton VPN and why I think you should too. They're based in Switzerland, outside the reach of US, EU, UK and Australian law. They don't keep logs and are built by the same team behind Proton Mail. When the UK passed its surveillance laws, Proton VPN became the #1 app on the App Store. Their stealth protocol beats censorship firewalls. Secure Core routes your traffic through privacy-first countries and NetShield blocks trackers before they ever reach you. I've used Proton Mail since Australia announced sweeping surveillance laws last year, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it's now essential. If you want to protect your privacy and support this channel, hit the link below to get up to 60% off Proton VPN. So why did this odd alliance suddenly explode after October 7th of 2023? A few things come together all at once. First, decolonization became the master lens. On campuses and activist spaces, everything was reframed as colonizer versus colonized. Israel was cast as the white settler state, Palestinians as the oppressed indigenous brown people. Of course, none of that is true, but that framing let the far left merge its anti-Western worldview with the Islamist story of jihad and resistance. Second, mass mobilization made it visible. The Gaza war sparked some of the biggest protests in years. Marches became weekly rituals. Encampments spread across campuses in the US and UK. In Australia, unions and community groups poured in behind coordinated national days of action. Suddenly, leftist activists and Islamist-aligned groups weren't just online allies, they were physically marching together shoulder to shoulder. Third, social media turned global. Chants like "From the river to the sea" went viral, showing up in New York one day and London the next. Although ironically, the version of "From the river to the sea" chanted by the Arabs is very different to what the Westerners chant. Protest playbooks, flyers, hashtags, even bail fund links spread instantly across borders. State-backed outlets like Iran's and Qatar's jumped in too, amplifying the message and cheering on Western protesters. And finally, youth opinion tilted sharply. In the US, surveys now show a majority of under 25 siding more with Palestinians, and in some polls, even Hamas than with Israel. Older generations lead the opposite way, but the younger crowd dominates activism. Their worldview is drawn in simple oppressor versus oppressed lines, and Islamist groups saw the opening to step right in. However, history shows these marriages of convenience don't last. The moment real power is at stake, the Islamist side tends to swallow the left. The far left is good at tearing things down, but hopeless at building stable systems. Islamism, on the other hand, comes with a ready-made 1400-year-old skeleton, a moral code, leaders, and discipline. Where the left second-guesses itself and dissolves its own values out of fear of being oppressive, Islamists step confidently into the void. The clearest example, Iran in 1979. Marxists and Islamists toppled the Shah together, chanting against imperialism. But once in power, Khomeini's movement purged its leftist allies. Many were jailed or executed once they outlived their usefulness. At its core, the two endgames cannot be reconciled, and history tells us exactly which one survives. Quick one, if you're enjoying this breakdown, hit subscribe, give it a like, and if you really want to support the channel, consider becoming a member on Patreon. Now, today, this alliance is already seeping into parliaments, councils, and ballot boxes. In Britain, Muslim voting blocs have become powerful enough to rattle Labour, once thought untouchable in immigrant-heavy districts. After Gaza, groups like the Muslim Vote openly organised against sitting MPs who wouldn't toe a hard pro-Palestinian line. At the last election, several independents backed by these networks actually unseated Labour candidates in areas with large Muslim populations. Suddenly, party leaders who once brushed off the rhetoric of the streets are scrambling because they know a few thousand votes in key seats can now decide their future. Australia is feeling it too. Galvanised by Gaza, younger Muslims are being urged to abandon the old habit of voting Labour by default. Instead, they're being told to swing behind Greens or independents who promise boycotts of Israel, foreign policy changes, or stronger protections around religion. Labour, terrified, decided to learn from their UK counterparts and give in, sometimes even nominating Palestinians as their candidates. And then there's America. For years, Democrats counted Muslim and Arab voters as a safe part of their coalition. That assumption collapsed after October 7. In places like Michigan and Minnesota, anger over Gaza drove Muslim groups to abandon Democrats in record numbers, at least the traditional candidate base. Now, they're nominating their own to almost devour the party from within. Similar to what we have seen in the UK and Australia. From Zafran Mamdani to Omar Fateh, these candidates embody the Islamic belief system intertwined with left-wing rhetoric. It's quite remarkable to see, and that's the danger of this alliance. The left thinks it can ride the Islamist tiger to bring down the West, but history shows the tiger always eats its rider. What begins as protests and pressure quickly turns into parties bending, not out of conviction, but out of fear. And if it keeps going, we risk letting the most illiberal forces in society dictate the agenda in the name of progress. At the end of the day, the Red-Green Alliance is in the future of the West. It's the funeral procession, and only one side is carrying the coffin. Hey, you made it to the end. As always, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and give the video a thumbs up. It really helps. A massive thank you to all my channel members and Patreon supporters. You're the reason I can keep making content like this. If you want to support the channel, consider joining the crew. Just hit the join button below or head over to Patreon. Even a small pledge goes a long way, and I would genuinely love to have you on board. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.